This stunningly cavalier attitude with respect to their discovery obligations is what led to the default in the first place. The defendants have consistently engaged in dilatory and obstructive discovery practices from the inception of these cases right through to the trial.
You just heard from the judge who is presiding over Alex Jones's second trial to determine damages he owes for defamation of Sandy Hook families. And yes, he had just stood trial. That had to do with one specific family he had defamed with his accusations of the shooting being a false flag and all of that. Now there is the second trial, which is taking place in a different state. And the judge is furious with Alex Jones and his attorneys for just refusing to do what they're supposed to do when they're standing trial, which is through discovery, you have to provide the documents that are expected of you. And in this case, it has to do with documents pertaining to Google Analytics. And it's important to have those documents because it's important to determine just how much money Alex Jones, through his company, has brought in. Now, the defense lawyers for a group of family of Sandy Hook victims asked the judge to sanction Jones for not disclosing web data about his coverage of the shooting. The lawyers wanted to draw connections between the Google Analytics data that Jones, the Google Analytics data and Jones's merchandise sales. And so it's important to do that to show just how much profit he made off of the lies he was spewing in regard to these victims and their family members. Now, Jones turned over data up through June of 2019, but that didn't reveal data from the last 3 years, which Jones's lawyers claimed didn't exist, but it did, in fact, exist. So Norm Pattis, a longtime attorney for Jones and InfoWars, said he was not happy that InfoWars hadn't turned over the Google Analytics data, but he argued it was not relevant. Oh, it's not relevant. Oh, fascinating. And there was no evidence that InfoWars had used this data to shape its own on-air coverage. But the judge, Judge Barbara Bellis, disagreed and ended up sanctioning Jones. Let's watch.
Perhaps the most egregious representation in the filings states that the defendant contends and has always contended that neither he nor the various entities with which he is affiliated has such data, and that there was nothing more that could be done. The defendants knew of the existence of the Google Analytic documents at a time these representations were made to the court by their counsel. The court hereby sanctions the defendants by precluding them from presenting evidence or argument that they did not profit from the Sandy Hook coverage.
And let's be clear, from the first trial, we learned that not only did Alex Jones and InfoWars profit handsomely off of their disgusting defamatory Sandy Hook coverage, they made, in some cases, as much as $800,000 a day. Okay, $800,000 a day. John, I mean, are we really surprised that Alex Jones, who ended up losing the defamation case because he refused to cooperate and hand over documents, is playing the same game again? Like, come on.
I think he's got his heart in the right place. I just think he's a little bit absent-minded, a little bit bad with paperwork, a little bit deranged. Yeah, no, he's going to continue to do it, and he will continue to do it in the same way that Trump is going to continue to drag out these legal processes as long as they're allowed to, which is apparently as long as they want. When you're worth hundreds of millions of dollars, as Alex Jones supposedly is, or billions of dollars, as supposedly Donald Trump is, you can apparently do literally whatever you want. If one of us were brought into court, we were to spit on the floor once, we'd spend a year in jail, or we'd be fined a massive amount. But for them, it doesn't matter. The judges just will not actually hit them hard enough to make them comply. So they can continue to show absolute disrespect for the process, disrespect for the victims of their various crimes. And the fact that, look, the legal ins and outs, my eyes glaze over eventually because, as in many cases, I have no real hope that there will be any justice. But the stuff that we find out along the way, the idea that he made $800,000 in one day off of selling like gorilla penis pills or something, no, but seriously, how is that possible? I understand some people watch him. Like, do you know how many people need to call in and buy $50 worth of your fake supplements to add up to $800,000 in a day? Like, it almost doesn't even seem possible. I don't know exactly what the breakdown for that is, but that's madness. That so many people, many of whom just, they think it's a fun show or whatever, that so many of them would buy something as esoteric as like brain fuel or whatever. How is that possible?
Well, I mean, remember, we learned this from the first trial to determine what he would have to pay in damages. One of the supplements he sells is literally named InstaHard. So I'm sure you can be creative and imagine what that's about. And look,
I'm there.
Preying on people's insecurity is very lucrative, and I think that has a lot to do with it. But I also want to note that remember, Alex Jones is attempting to skirt having to pay damages by declaring bankruptcy. Mm-hmm. And he's so stupid that he went on Steven Crowder's show today and bragged about his book sales. Do you, Boo?
Okay, no, the idea that his followers are buying books is even more ridiculous than them buying InstaHard. I ain't reading those books.
I mean, first of all, good. Good if they're not reading those books. I can't imagine what kind of lunacy is within those pages. But look, the point I'm trying to make here is this is a guy who has profited off of the pain and suffering of others. He's a massive grifter. He doesn't care whose life or whose lives he destroys as long as he's turning a profit. And it's very rare to see stories where there's some justice or chickens come home to roost when it comes to these bad guys. But it does appear that in this case, chickens have come home to roost. And this is just the beginning, okay? He's going to face several trials to determine damages for the many families he defamed through his Sandy Hook coverage. So